Okay, so what do I mean by drinking the Kool-Aid? What am I talking about? I'm talking about joining the church in an official capacity. A lot of people that I talk to, especially younger people who have been disenfranchised by the church, have a natural aversion to this idea. They are not interested in joining. They are not interested in membership. And for me, it begs the question, why? Have you ever really thought to ask yourself why? See, I think there's something going on that has to do with fear of commitment, fear of accountability, fear of responsibilities. There are no real privileges when it comes to officially joining a United Methodist Church, but there is one great big responsibility, and that has to do with voting. So I'm going to invite you to think about joining the church. Think of it like registering to vote. If you care about what we do here, and if it's ever helped you at all, then you need to have a say in how we go forward from here. That's what we're talking about this week at Kindred UMC. Kindred UMC live show features adults discussing adult topics, occasionally with adult language. It may not be suitable for young viewers. Please use discretion before watching. Hello all! Welcome once again to the Kindred UMC pre-recorded live show, coming to you not live but pre-recorded. My name is Chris Hayden. I'm the pastor of Kindred UMC.
My name is Ann, and I'm the treasurer for Kindred UMC.
My name is Adam, and I'm a random guy.
Random guy in a very lovely shirt, I might say.
I did pick it out special.
It's quite Florida.
It is quite Florida, even though it's like 69 degrees. Mm-hmm. But I don't care.
It was cold enough to open the doors, so that's nice.
Hey, that is always nice.
So we have been talking about what's typically called in the church stewardship, which is just a code word for giving money and joining the church. Like that's what it means.
What I've gathered.
Yeah. I've entitled it "What We Become, What We Worship." It's kind of like a "you are what you eat" kind of a thing. If you haven't checked out those videos, I encourage you to go back in the series and look at the earlier two videos that we talked about, and we talked about money. And today I want to talk about church membership. I have actually been kind of surprised at, and it seems to be a generational thing, at how reluctant individuals are, at least the people that we minister to and our congregation that we're kind of targeting and going after, which is people who have kind of been burned by the church or at least apathetic towards the church. They kind of freaking hate the idea of joining.
Yeah.
And I've always been kind of surprised. So I want to start with, this is a scripture from the book of Ephesians. I marked the wrong place, but it is the book of Ephesians, and I believe it's chapter 4. Chapter 4, verses 25 through 32. And it sounds like this. Okay, well, hold on. Before I start reading, I want to say a couple things about the book of Ephesians. It's an epistle, which means it's a letter that was written to a specific church, or in this case, scholars kind of agree that it's written to the church in general. And this one comes from, it's the first century, so it's not right when Jesus was around, and it's also probably after Paul died. So even though this letter is traditionally attributed to Paul, scholars kind of agree, this is probably a disciple of Paul that was kind of using Paul's theology and invoking Paul's name to try and rally the troops around kind of a set of ideas. And there's a lot of, you can nerd out. In fact, if you want to nerd out on that, I'm going to release a video later where I talk, or actually it'll be out before this by now, but where I talk about, I'll get into the scholarly debate about that, and I'll explain it to you. So if you're curious about that, look at that video too. But just know that this is generally a letter that was sent to the churches, and not necessarily in Ephesus, but in a broader sense. Hey, when you worship, go ahead and read this letter. So that's kind of what this is. And he's talking about, the writer's talking about this idea of being one. One body, many parts, unity in the body, that kind of stuff, and being equipped for a new life. We were this way, and now we can be this way. And so this is the section where he talks about what are the marks of that new life. So then, putting away falsehood, let all of us speak the truth to our neighbors. Not literal neighbors, but brothers and sisters in the church, like, and probably beyond that, but like, let us speak the truth to our neighbors. For we are members of one another. Be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and do not make room for the devil. Thieves must give up stealing. Rather let them labor and work honestly with their own hands. Sorry, I just finished dinner and I'm already burping. Oh, gosh, sorry. I apologize. Thieves must give up stealing. Rather let them labor and work honestly with their own hands, so as to have something to share with the needy. Let no evil talk come out of your mouths, but only what is useful for building up, as there is need, so that your words may give grace to those who hear. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, with which you were marked with a seal for the day of redemption. Put away from you all bitterness and wrath and anger and wrangling and slander, together with all malice. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ has forgiven you. These are the marks, and this begins a whole section. The writer goes on and on and on to talk about specifics of like, what does it mean to be the church together? And so, first of all, let me just say, if you are a Christian and you participate in a church, you should look and act and think and feel and treat others differently because of it. And that feels like a controversial statement to say these days, but I think it's so incredibly self-evident. If you have real faith, then it should manifest itself in behavior. Here's the problem with that, especially with Pauline theology, which is, he's like the main theologian for Christianity in the West, and the East for that matter. Paul insists that our works do not save us, but also that if we are actually being faithful, that our behavior should change. So let me start there with an idea of what it means to be a member. Because one of the things I want to suss out with that is membership is more than just like signing on a line. It's a commitment we make that we're actually going to behave and treat each other this way. So what's your just initial reaction to the idea of joining the church? And maybe as a part of that question, how do you think other people feel about the idea of joining a church?
When I was younger, they really pushed for it. But I kind of had beef with that because there's a lot that comes with it on getting to vote and make decisions. Like the church
you grew up with.
Yeah. But I was like, I think I was in middle school or early high school. Like, I don't even know how things are supposed to work in the world. And like, you want me to vote?
Same for me. Confirmation was when I joined the church, and that was around 12, 13 years old.
Yeah. And like, I don't want to vote on like how much the pastor makes. I don't even know like how much my dad makes. And like, like that was weird. So I made this kind of argument with it then that like, I don't feel that this is the time for that to be when this should happen for me. Now,
ideally, that's what, at least in the Methodist, I know you grew up Presbyterian.
Yeah.
So I don't know how similar it is or how different it is, but in the Methodist Church, confirmation there's usually a pretty strong emphasis on that.
Yeah.
Like, you make your choice about this. We're like, we don't want to pressure you into anything. And like when I was a youth director and when I was a youth, that was a pretty strong push for us. And like, so I think you're kind of like using it correctly, That's how I felt. And I actually talked to somebody who was a minister, or pastor rather, I guess, that had retired. And I was like, I'm getting a lot of kickback from like making this call. And he was like, if you don't feel that this is the right time or place, then that's okay. Mm-hmm. And now that I'm older and we're settling and we're like I'm building a family and bought my house and now it's kind of like, okay, well, like now it's time to plant the roots, like now it's time to make a foundation for that kind of thing. Because I think there is something to be said for like, exactly like you said, like I remember when kids would get baptized, all the members of the church would have to say like, and will you help raise? We agree
whole traditional.
It's my favorite part about infant baptism is the vows where you turn to the congregation. And I learned this from my pastor growing up, because there's all these commitments that the congregation has to make.
Yeah.
And he would always add on, will you volunteer for Sunday school? will you be in the nursery? Will you like? And he would like fill in very specific things about like we're helping to raise each other's kids, man.
Yeah, like
that
sense of community. Yeah, but like that was kind of part of the deal was like, okay, if you're joining the club, then like I don't think it was like a solid like we're gonna make you do this, like not at all. But it was kind of like, you're committing to this church family.
There's an agreement to be held accountable by the communal values.
Yes.
And I think I suspect that's what scares a lot of people these days.
I would think so. I mean, I have an interesting perspective, I think, on this, just because I've both, like from you, growing up in the church and the home church that I have, I've also been there since. Like I work there, and so I've seen, especially behind the scenes. So I have to type in.
Would you just tell people kind of what you do?
So I am the lead AVL tech at my home church, meaning I lead the team of tech people, audio, visual, lighting.
Lighting. Okay.
I do audio primarily.
It's weird that lighting's not visual, but go ahead.
Visual like screens, right? So like screens, like
screens and
videos and such, and lighting is like the backlight and everything else, and the audio is audio. But I type in the traditional responses, and we have the hymnal and all this stuff, and I've watched many of people get confirmed, old and young, and even then it's like young couples, and normally it's like kids, and I was confirmed in confirmation just like you guys were, like 13-ish, and it's funny how you said like there's no like it's like a strong push like choosing your own. I didn't really get that feeling. I kind of felt like it was just like you can choose, but like you're gonna do it.
But this is what you do.
But you're gonna do it.
Yeah, you're gonna do it.
Kind of a thing. And then we all fell and we did it and stuff. And I got my little cross and everything else. Yeah. But I have an interesting perspective just because I'm like, we're a traditional based church. We started we just started 25th anniversary a couple years ago. So it's, 27 years, give or take. So we're not a contemporary based church. We're very much traditional. And so a lot of the stuff's based in like membership, and we have a lot of the I hate to keep using the same word, traditionalist values.
So let me, I want to press in on what do you think, and maybe you don't agree with the premise of the question, so feel free to disagree with the premise of the question. But what do you think about people who, I experience younger people antagonistic about joining churches. Right. What do you make of that? Where do you think that comes from, especially because I'm the oldest person in the room right now?
I think that's true. I think that definitely has some facts in life, and I've seen that as well. People antagonistic just being from Kindred, just being a part of this group for a little while now. I don't see that at my home church because nobody's antagonistic. We all love the church.
Does that church have a lot of a strong population of younger folks who are joining?
As of late, yeah, we've gotten much more younger couples joining. And
so, can you kind of sense a difference between how they're approaching membership and how folks at Kindred? Because my experience is most of our congregation is not only nah, no thanks, but no, middle finger, F you, I'm not, don't ever ask me again. Yeah. That's an exaggeration for sure.
Right.
But there is no way. Haha, that's funny you asked.
That's adorable.
Yeah.
Definitely don't experience that there. It's much more communal based, and it's much more of not necessarily pointing out specific take care of the children and nursery and stuff like that, but it's definitely once the people join and find their home there, it's a community thing where everybody builds around each other, and there's everybody from all ages is volunteering.
Well, that's the selling point for me.
Is that work happening?
And it's like so many things with the gospel, it is a counterintuitive ask. We just talked last week about giving money and the idea that God doesn't need money. You need to give money. You need to share what you've been given. It's a human need inside of us. And this is the same thing. It's a similar thing. We need to feel like we belong in a community, and we need to have, even if it's unspoken, we need to have a social covenant together where we all agree that this is how we're going to act, and this is what we value, and this is how we're going to treat each other. And it occurs to me that that's at the heart of, joining a church. There's also very real, logistic, tangible things. Because one of the things that I've always said about membership is you don't really get any privileges. Joining the church it's not like we have a VIP room that you get access to, or some sky lounge that only you can get into because you're a member. Like, there's nothing like that.
If anything, you do more work.
Well,
You volunteer more.
Essentially, what you're doing is you're actually signing up to submit yourself to something bigger than you.
Right.
You know, and here's the thing about the United Methodist polity: when you join the church, you are now officially a voting member in major decisions about the church. And I wonder if those two things combined, the social covenant we make, and now you are accountable to other people, and you're responsible for important decisions that will need to be made from time to time. I think those are the two things that scare people away from membership. Here's what I want to offer, because let me just like show my whole hand of cards. You know, I want people to join Kindred UMC. I want people to become official members of Kindred UMC. We have certain standards, and we will ask you to make some certain commitments and vows, but we also don't have a police force or anything. We don't have any way to enforce them. We're just going to take you at your word as best you can. You know, but the reason for my ask for joining is because, as I've said before, we have a large asset. We have an investment fund that funds us, that lets us go. We're kind of on the outskirts of what a typical church is, and we're navigating this new kind of area of the world, and we're in transition on like, what is the church going to look like in the future, and how can we do a new, you know, so there's lots of logistics decisions that are being made about that. People are nervous and scared about that, especially people who are very comfortable with the established church as it is, and it makes us very vulnerable. If we don't have the people who are actually participating in Kindred UMC as real members of the church, then that means that other people can get a say in how we act, what we believe, how we spend our resources, how I, as the appointed pastor, spend my time. Like, all of the things that make us who we are essentially encapsulated in the community that commits to each other around this idea of membership. And so I was talking with a friend of mine who, shout out to Robots Radio. I was talking with a friend of mine who I went to youth group with and grew up with, and we're friends to this day. And he's a YouTuber and all, and so we were talking about this kind of stuff. And the analogy that came up was, I'm asking you to register to vote. We just got through with the midterm elections, and if you don't register to vote, you don't get a vote. If you care about where you live, you gotta register to vote. If you care about the ministry that we're doing at Kindred UMC, you gotta join, man. You gotta join. You gotta register to vote. Those votes will be very few and far between. We don't have major. We have once a year kind of a routine stuff. But eventually, we're going to get to the place where we need to make decisions about: do we purchase land? Do we buy a building? Do we donate half of our proceeds to other Methodist churches for one reason or another? How do we invest our future? Do we trust the United Methodist Foundation, or do we go on a venture capitalist thing? Or these decisions are coming. And if not just join, because I'm not just saying sign up, I'm saying in your heart, get on board. And if that get on board call doesn't come with some kind of an actual commitment, an honest, sincere commitment to each other, and to be held accountable with how we treat each other, how we treat others, what we believe about who God is, if it doesn't come with that kind of commitment to each other, then it's nothing. But when it does, it has the potential to shape the most important parts about who we are, what life is, how we are together. So, if you're out there and you have just a big old absolutely not feeling about membership, I really, really encourage you to rethink it, to really come to pray about it, examine your feelings about it. If you're uncertain, please reach out to me. Please reach out to someone. If you don't really know me that well or trust me or whatever, reach out to someone you do. Really do the work to actually analyze what in the world is going on with that feeling. And I encourage you to really consider joining in an official capacity the church that we're trying to build. So, with no further ado, because we're kind of at the end, I do want to say we're continuing to collect donations for the children's home, the Florida United Methodist Children's Home, and we're hoping to make Christmas very exciting and special and happy for kids who have been abused and are now in foster care and in the care of the United Methodist Church, the Florida Conference. So 100% of your donations will go directly to buying presents for those kids during Christmas. And then when Christmas is done, we'll pick another thing to give money to, because we don't have any overhead. We have an investment fund. So 100% of everything you give. And again, there will be a QR code on the screen somewhere. I'll put it there. If you've ever benefited from what we've done, our ministries, these videos, these talks, if you've ever been interested or in any way curious about what it might look like to be a church and a follower of Jesus in this particular context and culture, then please, I encourage you to reach out. Reach out about joining Kindred UMC in an official capacity. You can email us at kindredumc@gmail.com. My personal email is chris@kindredumc.com. And you can also leave comments, and I will read all those comments and respond to you if you are interested. You can direct message us on Instagram or Facebook. There's lots of different ways to get in touch with us, but I would love to have that conversation with you. So I really encourage you to rethink the way that you consider church membership. It goes along with what we're doing. We're reconsidering what it means to be a church in this current context. So I encourage you to reach out. I encourage you to consider it. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.